Good afternoon, or for some of you, good morning, and even others, good evening. My name is Paul Sherman, and I'm Harvard class of 1988.
And I'm David Garton, Babson College class of 1985.
David and I are in the profession of well-being coaching, and what that means is that we help people to thrive in all areas of their life, their home life, their work life, their community. People come to us looking for practices for how to increase fulfillment in their lives and decrease stress.
So as we start our webinar today, let's talk about what we mean by well-being and why it's important to us. We're going to discuss some of the skills and practices that you can introduce into your life to help you. And to help you with that, we'll introduce you to an approach that we've created. And then we will talk about some of the things that derail your well-being, as well as some of the success stories that we've seen along the way.
Great. By the way, you should know that David and I, not only are we in business together, but we're also a married couple. So let's start with what probably brought a lot of you here today, which is
stress.
Stress. So according to the American Psychological Association, more than 70% of Americans regularly experience either a physical or a psychological symptom of stress. It's not just true for Americans either. The World Health Organization calls stress the #1 health epidemic of the 21st century. And for those of you out there who are in the business world, there's actually a business case for stress reduction. Stress is costing corporations $300 billion annually in missed work, health costs, and lost productivity.
One of the statistics that Paul and I find particularly frightening is the average American high school student today suffers more anxiety than the average psychiatric patient did in the 1950s. So it's not just us. We're passing this on to our children. And Paul and I saw this every day with our executive and corporate coaching clients. They were completely stressed out and overwhelmed.
So this is yours truly, back in 2012. When I look at this picture, I cringe. At that point, well-being had become personal. I had suffered my 4th professional burnout, and at that point, David and I looked at each other and said, you know something, our corporate work needs to be expanded, and what we need to do is look at well-being because this is something that's not acceptable to us in the world. So what we did was we set about to create a learnable, teachable framework for well-being that could apply to people from all walks of life. And here's how we did that. We started with some research, and we looked at multiple areas, ranging from positive psychology, neuroscience, mindfulness. We looked at some religious and philosophical traditions, Taoism, Buddhism. We borrowed from the field that we'd been in for 30 years, which is coaching, leadership development, etc. So we took the research and combined that with our field work that we'd had and experienced in our coaching work. And then what we threw in for good measure was our own personal life experiences. And what we came up with was a framework for well-being that we call What Matters.
So for the past 4 years, Paul and I have been conducting workshops in a variety of organizations using our What Matters approach. We've done it in corporations and not-for-profits, community and faith-based organizations. We've done it in healthcare institutions and educational institutions. We've actually done it here at Harvard, both at the Kennedy School and with the rising sophomores as they transition to house life. All of that work and our research became the foundation for our newly released book, which is simply called Ask What Matters. It's a practical approach to your total well-being. So let's start with what we mean by well-being. So Webster's defines well-being as being a state of happy, healthy, or successful. We have a couple of issues with this. One is, why does it have to be an or? Why can't you be happy, healthy, and successful? And happy to us is a fleeting emotion, so that doesn't necessarily work. Healthy we get, and successful everyone defines differently. So let's look a little further into Gallup's work. Gallup has done extensive research in the field of well-being. They've come up with 5 components of well-being. They are career well-being, what you do on a daily basis and how much you enjoy it. Social well-being, the relationships and love that you have in your life. Financial well-being, how well you manage your economic life. Physical well-being is your health and the energy to accomplish your goals. And community well-being is how engaged and connected you are to the world around you. Now, Humana, along with the University of Michigan, has done extensive research and work in the field as well. They break it down to 4 categories: health, purpose, security, and belonging. And as you see, health can include physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health, whereas security can include financial security, personal security, and even the environment.
So we wanted to take the well-being definition a step further. And what we came up with was a metaphor around well-being being able to be the ability to author your life, to respond to the world around you as opposed to react to the world around you. We like to think about well-being as having a sense of aliveness, a sense of vitality, a sense of full engagement with your life. And so we boil this all down to the following: that well-being is living a fully engaged life of purpose, of health, and connection. Okay, so we've talked about what well-being is. What we want to do right now is switch to things that can derail your well-being. And it's important to know what can derail your well-being, because well-being is about a skill of awareness. And if you're aware of the things that can take your well-being off track, what you can do is proactively put things in place in your life to head those things off at the pass and better manage them. So we want to talk about well-being derailers using a metaphor. And now I'm showing my age, class of '88. I wrote my thesis on one of these guys back in William James Hall back in the day.
So imagine if we took a computer from the 1980s and started running programs and apps that we have today. Streaming media and gaming, Skype, all of those require so much memory and interaction in the operating system would completely crash and be overwhelmed. So too is what's happening with us these days. We're completely bombarded and overwhelmed with information, choices, and ongoing interaction. So we've got 24/7 news cycles. We have constant texts, emails, and information alone is overwhelming. Do you know, in the past 5 years, more information has been created than all of mankind prior? And it's not just information overload, it's when we're thinking about our professional lives. So not only could you be stressed out or overwhelmed with your job, but just making the transition can be overwhelming. Choices, options of how you work and where you work. And then you go to resources, and there are hundreds of books on the subject. These are 2 of our favorite books on career work. And we also want to direct you to the Harvard Alumni Association's prior webinar, Reinventing Your Career with Matthew Temple. It's a great resource. And then things as simple as going to the grocery store, which used to be a mundane task, is now overwhelming in choice. I have to read these numbers because I can't even believe it. There are 10 types of liquid Tide. There are 14 varieties of Cheerios, 15 types of Thomas's English muffins, and 15 kinds of Crest toothpaste. Attention store manager, meltdown in aisle 10.
So, another aspect of a well-being derailer, our friend technology. I want to read something to you that was in a recent New York Times article, and this is from David Solomon, the president and co-COO of Goldman Sachs. And he says this, and I quote, "Today, technology means that we're all available 24/7. And because everyone demands instant gratification and instant connectivity, there are no boundaries, there are no breaks." So here's the thing, coming back to our operating system metaphor, the human operating system requires downtime. But because of the constant connectivity that we have and expectations that people have, there is no more downtime. So we've talked about information overload. We've talked about choice overload. We've talked about no boundaries. There's another well-being derailer that we must be aware of. And it's the sociological phenomenon of our culture of busy.
In her book, Overwhelmed, Bridget Schulte of the Washington Post writes, "Busyness is now the social norm that people feel they must conform to or risk being outcasts. People are competing about being busy. It's about showing status, that if you're busy, you're important. Somewhere towards the end of the 20th century, researchers contend busyness became not just a way of life, but glamorous. Now they say it is a sign of high social status. And we saw this with our corporate executive coaching clients, where they were competing to be busy and show busyness.
So, derailers, too much information, too many choices, no boundaries, the culture of busy. There's one more thing that is probably the biggest well-being derailer, and that's this. We as human beings have a natural proclivity to overestimate danger in our lives.
So meet Thor and his friend the saber-toothed tiger. Our caveman ancestors were actually wired to overestimate danger in order to survive. This is where fight or flight comes in. It would allow the adrenaline and cortisol to soar through their system, giving them the ability to survive, either fight or flee. But back then, when they either fought or fled, the adrenaline and cortisol would dissipate from their system. That doesn't happen with us today.
So fast forward to the 21st century. We still overestimate danger. Now, it was important for Thor to overestimate danger because you'd rather overestimate the likelihood of a saber-toothed tiger attack than underestimate.
I know I would.
Yeah. Now, today, we have new saber-toothed tigers. Fears and overestimation of financial ruin, job loss, health scares. We overestimate the likelihood, not downplaying that these things don't happen because they do, but what our minds do is to catastrophize. The woman up in the left-hand corner of your screen, she's suffering from shame. And back in Thor's time, if you were ostracized or shamed, you'd be thrown out of the tribe and you could be eaten. Now today, what our monkey brain tells us is that if we don't fit in or we don't conform, that we're going to get eaten. So again, our monkey brain in the 21st century is causing our well-being to be derailed.
So we have all these things trying to derail our well-being, and we introduce you to our What Matters approach to well-being. It's an approach that consists of 5 practices and 5 mindsets. The 5 practices are stop and ask, reach in, reach out, plan, and act. And the 5 mindsets are gratitude, self-honesty, curiosity, kindness, and humor. And at the crux of the approach is for you to be aware of what matters to you, to make the choices that are in alignment with what matters to you, and then take the proper action. Now, as you look at the model, you might say, this is fairly simple, and we designed it intentionally to be simple, and we call it practices for a reason, because incorporating it into your life isn't necessarily easy. We automatically go into autopilot. So we introduce a simple model because what we say is common sense and common practice are sometimes 2 very different things.
So where we're going with the rest of the webinar today is to walk you through the What Matters framework. And as we do this, we encourage you to identify the individual well-being practices that you can hang off of each aspect of this framework. And we're going to start with our first practice, and we always laugh about this because your well-being actually starts with a stopping. Think back to that culture of busy slide before. The habit of being able to ground yourself into what is most important to you is a way for you to be able to withstand all of the stimuli that are coming at us in the modern world. There's research out of Carnegie Mellon University that says when you are clear about what's most important to you, your cortisol and adrenaline levels go down. So what we've done, and actually what we've named our framework after, is one simple question, which is what matters? And you can ask yourself what matters every day. You can ask yourself what matters once a year. We encourage you to do big stop and asks, the once a year stuff, and little stop and asks, the everyday, as a way to keep yourself grounded. And we actually want to do an exercise with you guys right now, and we're going to model it. So, David, what matters to you?
Our family matters to me, our dog matters to me, doing this well-being work and bringing it into the world really matters to me. And this weekend, I want to get out in the yard and do some yard work, so that matters to me. What
Great.
matters to you, Paul?
So right here, right now, adding value for our audience matters to me. In the bigger picture, my health, I never want to experience what I did with the neck surgery ever again. And also, having meaningful work to do matters to me.
Great. So now we're going to invite you to type into the chat box what matters to you.
And as we're waiting for you to type some things in, what we want to share with you, we've been doing workshops for the past 4 years using the What Matters approach. These are some of the things that our workshop participants have told us.
So let me see. We have family, spouse, pet, security, music, children, making a difference, volunteering. Great. So taking the stop and ask one step further, we want to introduce you to the What Matters Wheel of Life. We use this wheel as one of our first practices to help people once we've asked them what matters. So the wheel is broken up into 6 sections, and we ask people what matters, and they come up with 6 components of their life. And on the outside perimeter, they write the component of their life, and then we ask them, how much does that matter to you on a scale of 0 to 10, and they rank it. And then we ask them, how much are you honoring what you say matters to you from 0 to 10. And by honoring, we mean time, energy, and focus. As you see on your screen, people are still typing in what matters with them, so enjoy those answers as well. What we find when we do this tool, we call it a selfie, actually, because it's a moment in time where you get to gauge what matters to you and how much you're honoring it. Because our contention is a lot of the stress and anxiety that people feel is because things are in their head and they've got too much going on. When they put it down on paper and actually see how they're doing, it can either make them feel better or help them put a plan together. So let's take an example. Christine did one of our workshops, and as you can see in her wheel, she has family importance 10 and honoring it 3. And then she has work importance 9 and she's honoring it 4. So she was upset when she came up to us. She said she's stressed out because she's taking too much time away from her family with work. So we asked her what was going on. She travels a lot internationally for a financial services company, and that takes time away from her family. So we said, well, how is work going? And she said she was actually very unfulfilled, but the reason she stayed with the job rather than looking for something else was that in 18 months she would vest with the company and have a significant financial payoff. So we asked her if taking away time from her family in the short term was worth the long-term financial gain. And she said, actually, yes. So awareness. She knew what was causing her stress. She was feeling guilty about, and this happens all the time, particularly with working mothers. The guilt and self-judgment come up. So she was feeling guilty about taking time away from her family. So we said, is the payoff going to be worth it? And she said, yeah, because when she vests, it will allow her to pay off the mortgage, fund her daughter's college education, and give her the flexibility to take some time off and start a consulting business. So awareness, she was in choice, and then action. We asked her, what action could she help take in order to help her well-being, the sort of guilt and judgment she was doing and being stressed out. She said, as much as she and her husband had peripheral conversations, she thought they had to sit down together as a couple and actually formalize a plan. So what she did was they knew what the vest date was, they picked a quit date for her, they also scheduled a family vacation after she quit, and then that would allow her the time to take some time off and start a consulting business. So awareness, choice, and action. As you see, her situation didn't change. But by getting it out of her head onto the paper and realizing she had more of a thought process into it, she felt a lot better.
And having the critical conversations. Not only did she speak with her husband, she spoke with her kids as well. So she was in choice about what she was doing and being deliberate. Another comment about Christine. I spent 25 years in the human resources field. And one of the things that I heard an awful lot of during that time was the term work-life balance. David and I are considered heretics. We think there's no such thing as work-life balance. You have one life. You have work-life choices. So choose accordingly. And you have a wonderful expression that I love when you use.
Yeah, because people are always saying, can you have it all? And what I say is, you can have it all, not necessarily all at the same time. So give yourself some slack.
Yeah. So let's look at another case here, Sophie. So Sophie's a woman in her early 50s. She has 3 children. 2 of them are already off at college, and 1 is still in high school. And you can imagine the high schooler has issues that high schoolers have. Sophie works outside the home, and Sophie has another wrinkle in her life. She has a husband who is chronically ill and requires frequent trips to the doctor. The thing about Sophie's husband is he's a pretty demanding person, and he really demands that she be there with him at his doctor's appointments. Sophie did her wheel and looked at it and said, you know something? I'm feeling really good about how what I say matters to me aligns with my choices. But yet, if you're defining well-being as a sense of fulfillment, of vitality, of aliveness, I'm not feeling that. I feel stressed, I feel anxious, and I'm just coping in life. What we realized in working with Sophie was what was missing from Sophie's wheel was actually Sophie. Her health. Health appeared nowhere on her wheel. The thing that we want to reinforce at this point in the webinar is that stop and ask, the stop and ask practice, and particularly the stop and ask wheel of life, is an awareness tool. This was Sophie's burning platform. She became aware that if she didn't do something around her own health, then she wasn't going to be around that well to see her grandchildren. And so she became aware of wanting to make changes around her health. We're going to be revisiting Sophie later on in the webcast because it's one thing to become aware about what needs to be changed. It's another thing entirely to make the choices and take the action that's required to do that.
So let's recap Stop and Ask. Stop and Ask is about asking 3 questions. What matters to me? To what extent am I honoring what I say matters to me? And what changes or choices do I want to make in accordance to what matters to me for my well-being? So now that we know that what matters to me is important and that it's the key to well-being, what gets in the way of living a life that matters? We joke about the fact that there's only 2 things that get in your way, you and everything else.
All right, let's look at you. You are what we call your internal circumstances. Everything else is what we call your external circumstances. So external circumstances, that's the objective reality in which you live, the place that you find yourself in life. There are fixed external circumstances, things like your age, your race, the number of children you've already brought into the world. Then there are variable external circumstances, things like your job, where you live, the amount of debt that you have, who you're married to.
Hey.
Don't worry, we're good. External circumstances. What well-being is fundamentally about is to be able to make choices to align your external circumstances with what you say is most important to you. Now, if you have prior commitments like that mortgage, like that, like a job contract, that are external circumstances that you can't quickly get out of, that's where internal circumstances come into play. And what we mean by internal circumstances is that is your own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and personal narrative of how you make sense of the world around you. And the framework of well-being is all designed around helping you to navigate your internal circumstances and carefully choose your external circumstances.
Which leads us to our second practice, reach in. Reach in is fundamentally about developing resilience. And the reason we talk about resilience is you can plan the best world that you want, but things just come up. Sickness, divorce, job loss. The idea is reach in will help build up your resistance to deal with the whitewater of life. So ultimately, it's aligning body, mind, and spirit. Now, body we all pretty much have a sense of. It's eating well, it's getting some exercise, and getting rest on a regular basis.
And also, relating to body, we hear a lot in the world about wellness.
Good point.
That's when you look at the reach in practice and about aligning body, that's where wellness comes in. How are you eating? What's your blood pressure, et cetera? That's what you were just referring to.
Smoking cessation, things like that. So well-being, again, is the larger framework. Wellness could be a component of it. So aligning body. Mind, I'm going to let Paul take because that's his thing. And spirit is about connecting to something greater than yourself. It can be a formalized religion if that works for you. It can be nature. It can be music. It can be art. This is one of my go-to reach-in practices for spirit. This is our rescue dog, Brando. And every morning before I get out of bed, I call him up under the bed and he stands on my chest. And I look into those big brown eyes and it's calming, peaceful, it sets the tone, and I get a boost of oxytocin, the love drug, and that's the best way to start my day.
So again, the reach-in practice, it's aligning body, mind, and spirit. Now, David always lets me talk about mind because when you saw that picture of me in the hard collar before, that's where my mind brought me. I am someone who has a lot of busyness in my head. And here's the thing. The average human being has 60,000 thoughts a day, and 70% of those thoughts are negative. Now, why? It all comes back to Thor. We're overestimating danger. So all of the negative self-talk that you have and the worry, your mind is trying to protect you. But unfortunately, in trying to protect you, it goes a little bit too far. So one of the things that we've done is to curate a number of different tools. We've developed some of our own, but we're agnostic as far as well-being goes. Find the tools that work for you. And around the mind stuff, here are some that we've curated that I've used on my own that have helped me to enhance my well-being. The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris uses something called acceptance and commitment therapy. This book makes it very accessible to the layperson. Another book, Taming Your Gremlin by Rick Carson, takes those crazy thoughts in your head and actually turns them into characters that you can have conversations with. Some folks may not like that kind of a thing, but those of you who want to have some fun with your mind, I encourage you to go for it. Another approach, Loving What Is by Byron Katie. What she does is she gives you 4 questions to ask yourself when you have a stressful thought. And in asking those 4 questions, the thought that's stressing you out loses some of its Velcro. And lastly, Headspace, a great online resource. You hear a lot these days about mindfulness. In fact, Aetna has a chief mindfulness officer. And if you go to Headspace, it gives you a number of different apps to help you learn how to meditate, learn how to be mindful, and find some well-being tools that work for you.
So we're also at this time asking you to share reach-in tools that work for you. And we see some responses from the audience. Listen to music, take a moment to enjoy the small things.
Oh, there's a neat one, hypnotherapy. Yeah. We haven't seen that one.
No. Pilates, volunteering is, that's a great idea. A couple of the other fun ones that some of our clients have brought to us are hula hooping, knitting, and adult coloring books.
Actually, my sister-in-law taught us a reach-in practice of adult coloring books. It's fascinating.
Well, this brings us to our next practice, which is reach out. Reach out is about going beyond yourself and asking others for help. So we don't believe in this whole go-it-alone society. People are in your life to help you, and you're there to help other people as well. So, who are the people that can help you on your journey to well-being? Friends. You can hire professionals such as a therapist or a coach. You can join groups like Lean In. You can join a yoga class. If the need arises, something like AA, whatever the tools and practices that will help you by reaching out. And the thing that we encourage people to do is not only just reach out and ask for help, but reach out and offer your help and your skills to other people. The sort of image that we use for this is the turtle and the octopus. What does a turtle do when it's under siege? It withdraws. And what we encourage you to do is don't be a turtle. Be an octopus and reach out.
So you can tell we have a lot of fun at our house sitting around coming up with these metaphors. Anyway, so seriously, when we built the framework, we were amazed at the amount of research that supported the reach out practice. And we're on a Harvard webinar, so we thought it'd be important to contribute something back to Harvard. So there's been a study going on at Harvard for 75 years on, it's the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And a couple months ago, they released their latest research. And this is what Robert Waldinger, who is the director of the study, this is what he had to say. So the clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. He goes on to say this: loneliness kills. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism.
I don't know if you saw recently on Facebook, there was a story that went around about an elderly woman who was very isolated and lonely, and she posted a note on a neighbor's door saying, "Would you be my friend?" It went viral, and a lot of people ended up connecting. So reach out and offer connection to elderly people or anyone that you see in need.
So some other research, again, those of you in the business world watching this, there's actually a business case for creating reach out cultures in your organization. So Indiana University has done a number of studies across multiple industries, including the hospitality industry, the manufacturing industry, financial services. What they found is that those business cultures that fostered a reach out mentality of asking for and offering help, when you look at their key performance indicators such as customer satisfaction and operating costs and employee engagement, all of those factors increased when there was a culture in which people offered and asked for help and found that to be safe. One more thing too, relating to reach out, we're actually here in America at least, so those Americans who are watching, the University of Michigan has a study that says that in our top 10 values as Americans, self-reliance is on one of the top of the list. So society is actually working against reach out.
So if we bring this back to Sophie and we think about her situation, she was basically a very private person, but she pushed herself for her own well-being to reach out. She asked for help getting carpooling with her child, providing rides for her husband to his appointments, and then on days that she had to work late, even asking friends to prepare a family meal.
And building off Sophie yet still, it wasn't easy for Sophie to learn these new skills of reach out. But for the sake of her long-term well-being, she knew she had to. When you look at Sophie's external circumstances, the teenage daughter was not going anywhere. The husband who was demanding was not going anywhere. What Sophie had to do was work with her internal circumstances and get herself to overcome the guilt that she was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a bad mother and I'm a bad wife if I don't go to all the appointments and if I'm not there picking up my daughter every day and making every meal. So it was a stretch. Well-being is a set of muscles and practices. The same way that you go to the gym and the first time you use those biceps, they wake up aching the next day, you may feel that as you start exercising some of these well-being muscles. We have another tool. This is something that David gave me when I was struggling. This was pre-neck surgery days. So this is my Reach Out Toolkit. And what's in this box is the names of different people in my life who are meaningful to me. What I do proactively every day, I reach into my Reach Out Toolkit and I pull out a name of somebody who I call. And what I do is I call the person and it's not a whole long conversation. It's 1 minute of me saying, hi, I really care about you and I want to let you know that you're in my heart and you're my mind today. What that does for me, and if I get a voicemail, by the way, I just leave a voicemail. What that does for me is it builds up a reserve of positive relationship energy so that on the days that are tough for me, when my external circumstances are getting the best of me, I've built up a resiliency so emotionally I feel connected to other people and I feel less alone in the world.
So we call that Reach Out Recess because who didn't love recess as a kid? What Matters is basically a shared learning model, and we got an email from a woman from Toronto who read our book, And she shared this reach out tool that she uses with her girlfriends. She has 14 friends who are on a text chain on their phones. And when one of them is feeling overwhelmed or in need, rather than calling up one friend, they don't want to feel burdensome and they don't know who's got time that day. So they send out an SOS to the group, and all they type in is, "I'm having a bad hair day." And whoever has the bandwidth that day reaches out for that friend and offers assistance.
So, in review, we've stopped and asked. We've reached out. We've reached in. Next, what we need to do is plan. Here's the thing. The first 3 practices in the What Matters framework are about you becoming present in the now of your life. Plan is the first time in the framework that we invite you to think about the future. Now, as human beings, we're naturally pulled into the future. It's just, some of us are more anxious than others, but we're all pulled there. What plan is about making a conscious effort to think about your future and think about, what do I want to create for myself? What are the steps for creating it? And what's my time frame for doing so?
And plan, just like all the other steps, can be done in big and small ways. So an example of a big P plan would be planning for retirement. A small P plan could be planning a weekend getaway.
Like the rest of the What Matters framework, planning is a personal thing. So we have a client, Megan, and she says that in order for her well-being to be at its best, she wants to plan her life in 3-month increments. So what she's done is she's chosen as a profession to be a traveling nurse. So every 3 months, she has a stop and ask moment and asks, do I want to stay with where I am, or do I want to try a different geography and a different institution? Plan in a way that works for you. Planning is personal.
And then the final component of plan is, don't forget to plan how you want to feel along the way. Oftentimes we get caught up with the "I'll be happy when" mentality. What we invite you to do is use the mindset of "I'll be happy while." Plan to feel well along the way. So if we use Christine as an example, she was stressed out because she felt like she was neglecting her family. But once she had a plan in action, she realized that the financial payoff was worth it. So in her mind, she felt better. So she felt like she was working towards something for her family, dissipating the guilt. So she felt good every day because it was part of her bigger plan. So planning on how you want to feel along the way.
And here's the thing, folks. We're not Pollyanna here. Every day is not going to be a party. But when we talk about the concept of remembering to how you want to feel along the way in your journey, what we mean by that is if you're miserable more of the time than you're satisfied on the way to getting to your journey, you may want to have some stop and ask moments and ask the question, is there any course correction that I want to do? So don't forget to plan for how you want to feel along the way in your journey. So we've stopped and asked, we've reached in, we've reached out, we've planned. Now it's time for the rubber to meet the road, act. And one thing that we want to talk about in the ACT practice is the role of imperfect action. This is one of our favorite quotes from Harry Truman. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time. Do something. Do something. And an example that we want to share with you is a client of ours, Jim, is a mid-career changer, and he came to us for some help. And the first thing we said to him was, Jim, how are you doing with networking? And his response was, I haven't done any of that yet. And we asked why. And he said, because I don't have my resume down. And we said, how long have you been working on your resume? And he said, 2 months. And we said, Jim, we don't want to downplay the importance of a resume in finding a job, but we all know that networking is the key to finding a job. And what we invited him into was imperfect action, to go out with the resume that he had in order to see what kind of traction that he could get from a networking standpoint. When you look at what gets in the way of taking imperfect action, again, it comes back to our caveman brain. Our 70% of our negative thoughts can be about fearing failure. So we're wired not to take imperfect action.
So when we think about action, just like all the other practices, there are big A actions and small A actions. Taking health as an example. A small A action could be deciding to walk a mile a day. A big A action could be sitting down with your doctor to talk about gastric bypass surgery. And the third thing we want to talk about as far as action is accountability. Hold yourself accountable and find out the best way that works for you for that accountability. It can be writing it down, it can be using an app, or it can be finding an accountability buddy. If you write it down and share that goal with a friend, you're 35% more likely to accomplish the goal. The apps already exist out there to hold you accountable from a myriad of sources. And then an accountability buddy, this can be actually fun because you have someone not only to hold you accountable, but to encourage you along the way. So if we use weight loss, continue with that. It could be someone to either work out with or just plan meals with, but hold yourself accountable with a friend. And then at the end, you can celebrate your target goal by either getting new clothes or splurging on a chocolate, hot fudge sundae, whatever you want to do.
I'll remind you of that.
Yeah.
So the other thing too I want to bring up about accountability, in our corporate coaching practice, one of the things that we've done is encourage organizations to create accountability buddy partnerships so that somebody is partnered up with someone else in the company and their sole job is to check in with somebody about their well-being and help them stick to the commitments that they've made to themselves around keeping themselves vital and fulfilled and alive. So, the practices of stop and ask, reach in, reach out, plan, and act are what we call the doing of the What Matters framework. We now want to shift over to what we consider to be the being of the What Matters framework and talking about What Matters mindsets. And we're going to introduce the concept of mindsets if you'll indulge us in a quick and what we hope is fun activity for you.
So in the comment section, please type in words that come to mind when you see this image. We're on a little bit of a delay here, but let me see. I get brave, selfless, patriot. Okay, now let's go to this image.
Wait a minute, it says there's a 30-second delay. Let's check with our team here. Are we seeing those comments? Great, okay, good. All right, let's go to the next guy.
Okay.
Wait a minute, we got a 30-second delay before the audience sees the photos, so we got to do a little...
Sorry about that, folks.
We got to do a little tap dance here. And what do we got?
Okay, so they might be seeing the uniformed person right now.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So, again, images that came up or words that came up are patriot, uniform, service, courageous. Okay.
Pride, okay. Honor, duty.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's look at this guy. What are we seeing? What are we seeing in relation to this fellow?
So we see
Artist, creative, hippie.
cool.
Tough, cool.
Okay, so
Content.
as you may have realized, this image is of the same person. The only thing that has changed is the clothing that he's wearing. And we use this exercise to show you that if your impression of someone can change based on an article of clothing, imagine if you had a tool that you could use to switch your view of the world and change the circumstances and help your well-being. That's exactly what the mindsets do.
So the What Matters mindsets are active attitudes and frames at which to look at the world, and there are 5 of them. We have gratitude, self-honesty, curiosity, kindness, and humor. And all of these are backed up by research from the positive psychology movement.
So let's start with gratitude. Robert Emmons is a leading researcher on gratitude. And gratitude is basically being thankful for the gifts in your life. And what Emmons has found out in his years of research is people who practice gratitude regularly are not only happy, they're healthier, and they're a lot more fun to be around. So practice gratitude. And one of the practices that we encourage people to do is every day think of 3 things that you're grateful for, and to reinforce it, write them down.
While we're on the topic of gratitude, we got to do a couple of shout outs here. First of all, to the great crew that we have, thank you all so much for making us look good. From the alumni perspective, James Chung, my college roommate, was instrumental in getting us here today, so thank you, James. Andrea Schlepak Male from the class of '88 helped us actually was instrumental in helping us think through the What Matters framework. Melissa Marstead was an original adopter of the What Matters framework, and Matthew Temple was our liaison from the Alumni to get us here. At Harvard, we want to thank Mary Beaulieu, who is a dean at the Kennedy School, for using this work, and the Khuranas, Rakesh and Stephanie Khurana over at Cabot House, for bringing this to their sophomores.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Self-honesty is our next mindset. And you keep talking about weight this whole time.
I know.
And I'm looking
There's
at
a
this
reoccurring
picture.
theme here.
So self-honesty is about telling yourself the truth about what matters to you and about what's happening in your life. An example of a self-honesty in action, we have a client, Randy, who was a physician for 20 years, and he was growing disillusioned about his work as a physician and always had a passion for cooking and food. And he decided that he wanted to jettison his medical career and become a chef. His internal circumstances were barring him from doing that. He knew what mattered to him was to be a chef, and what he had to do, again, for the sake of his long-term well-being, was to work with his internal circumstances. And today, Randy has a great private chef practice and is helping people with their health that way.
Curiosity. Curiosity is simple. It's about looking at the world with childlike wonder and openness. It's the opposite of judgment. So the example that we use for curiosity is road rage. And imagine you're driving down the highway and somebody cuts you off. If you're like me, initially what happens is I grip the steering wheel and I can feel the adrenaline and cortisol soaring through my body. Imagine if you could take a moment and break that and use the lens of curiosity, saying, I wonder what's going on with that person, what's going on in his life. I wonder if there's a family emergency. Because again, remember, that person's already half a mile down the road. This is about your well-being. So what we're doing is we're introducing the curiosity mindset to prevent you from being emotionally hijacked. So curiosity.
Yeah, and relating to curiosity, the Journal of Personality Psychology came out with something. The opposite of curiosity is judgment. And what the article in the study said is that when we judge other people and when we judge ourselves, it actually increases our cortisol and adrenaline. So use the curiosity antidote, and we do quite a bit of work with work teams and companies, and we introduce curiosity as a skill to lower the stress level on a team, and actually it increases creativity as well. Our next mindset, kindness. When we put the framework together, we said to each other, isn't it pretty sad that we have to put this into a framework? Here's the thing, folks. Our human operating system has so much coming at us that we need to be aware to be kind. And the science says kindness is good for you. David Hamilton is the foremost practitioner of kindness research. You can find a ton that says that this is good for us physically and psychologically. There's another piece of research out there by Kristen Neff, who is at the University of Texas, Austin. She talks about self-compassion, which is kindness to self. Those of you who are out there who tend to beat yourselves up, we encourage you to go to her website. There are some great tools that you can help to get more compassionate with yourself. And Sophie, from our earlier case study, is someone who had to learn better self-compassion for her well-being.
And finally, humor. The University of Maryland and Loma Linda University have done extensive research in humor, and people who inject humor into their daily routine have higher sense of well-being and are healthier. They have lower anxiety and depression. The example that we use for humor is when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years ago, I reached out for my friend Jack, who had taken his mother in, and he said to me, it's going to be hard, you're going to have some really horrible days, but try and find some humor in this situation. And I was like, how can I find humor here? And the example he used was, on his very worst days, he would try to imagine the look on his landlord's face if he knew how many people his mother thought lived in the apartment with them. So humor.
So we've come to the end of the framework. We're stopping and asking, what matters to me? How much am I honoring what matters to me? And to what extent might I want to make some changes in my life? Reach in, align body, mind, and spirit. Reach out, ask for and offer help. Plan, actively think about what you want to create in your future, the steps for getting there, the time frames, and don't forget to plan for how you want to feel along the way. Act. Do imperfect action. Set up accountability buddies for yourselves, and you don't have to boil the ocean. Small A action is okay. All the while incorporating the mindsets of gratitude, self-honesty, curiosity, kindness, and humor. I'm looking at the clock, and there's 10 minutes left. So what I would, if it works for you, how about we take some questions and then we can close it up.
What we want to do is we want to ask people questions that they have regarding the model and incorporating it into their lives. Then we'll do our little wrap up. So.
Oh, this is a great one. Sometimes reaching out is perceived as a weakness. How can we overcome that idea? Here's the thing, folks. Well-being is actually an act of leadership. And when we talk about personal resilience and we talk about, I come back to Sophie before, there's a risk that you're taking. And what we encourage you to do for the sake of your own well-being is to model it and do it. So it will feel risky, but we encourage you to try it.
Well, and the other thing is, think about it from the other perspective. When someone asks you for help, you're always happy to do so. There's also something called the helper's high. So you're actually helping your friend by asking them for help.
Oh, I love this one. What's the best way to deal with mean-spirited colleagues? The curiosity mindset is, it's my go-to. If somebody's being jerky in a meeting, ask yourself, gee, I wonder what's going on in their life, in their minds, that's causing them to act this way. You can also, too, practice gratitude and be grateful that you actually, as a person, that you're not mean-spirited. This is all about managing your internal circumstances around that.
Okay.
What else do we have?
Can you say more about the transition as mentioned earlier?
Oh, Christine. Can you say more about well-being
No, it just
in a
says
transition?
transitions in general, I believe.
As mentioned, okay.
Yeah, so transitions are different periods of your life. I think the person here in particular is talking about job transition. So you're working full-time and you want to hunt for a job. This is where reach out can actually help a lot. Your network, as far as finding out how other people have done it. As we said before, Matthew Temple's webinar that he did before was all about reinventing your career. He had some great tools there. And it doesn't take as much time necessarily as if you can put a plan together where you set aside a certain amount of time each day for that.
Wow, there's some really great questions here. How to subtly lead the team with lessons we learned here today. Well, this is a really interesting thing. We actually use this framework in our corporate work, and it's actually not so subtle. We actually work with our leaders and have them say that we're going to talk about well-being because it's good for humanity, and oh, by the way, it's also good for business. And we actually have teams have open dialogues about this framework. So it's not subtle, it's very deliberate. And you, as a manager, you're actually taking on a leadership role by introducing this holistic framework into the workplace. And if you look at Gallup has a ton of research. That well-being book that we had up there before will show you. There's something called the Well-Being Finder, actually, that you can do with your teams. It's online. So don't be subtle about it.
How do we manage office politics? Geez, this is all about modeling behavior, I think in some ways as a leader, and being honest. And sometimes it's just calling things out. So you can also use curiosity as far as if someone's trying to manipulate a situation, wonder what's going on in their life, what are they trying to do. But this is where what matters conversations can come into play.
Why don't you say a bit about that?
And we use that term a lot because conversations start with yourself, but we encourage you to bring them into the other areas of your life, with your spouse, with your family members, at work and in the community. So in a work situation where you see some things going haywire and maybe some backstabbing or whatever, let's just call it out, you can say, gee, what's going on here? What really matters? What matters to our team? What matters to our organization? And suddenly, a lot of the political maneuvering can dissipate because people realize we are on the same team. It's not a Pollyanna thing. It's about taking a look at the bigger picture. The other thing, we talked about transitions, but our real hope is that you're going to be able to use what matters in all areas of your life. So, you want to do a recap?
Actually, I want to do this one of us, this sort of Pollyanna question. Is always being positive at work a good thing? What we talk about is being honest. There's research that says, this is from John Gottman, and the things that derail us at work are blame, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. So that question used the word positive. I invite you there to avoid blame, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. And if you're not doing those things, you can be direct. Direct and positive are not mutually exclusive. This is where self-honesty comes into, and this is where basic respect comes in as well.
Why don't you put the URL up for
resources?
resources?
Oh, good. Thanks.
So as we recap here quickly, this is the resources that are complimentary on our website, some of the tools that we've mentioned, some of the books, some of the other tools and resources. And what we encourage you to do is to use the What Matters framework and bring it into all aspects of your life. You can do it with specific questions. Does putting an addition onto the house make sense, or should we move? Transitions in your life, getting married, job change, planning for retirement, and the What Matters conversations.
So coming back to the human operating system that we spoke about before, you can use the What Matters framework situationally, as David just described. One of the things that we encourage people to do is actually make these things a regular part of your day, like brushing your teeth. Why? We purport that the human operating system of the 21st century, handling all the bombardment that we talked about before, requires this kind of exercise. So if you learn how to do things, not just situationally, but also put this into your regular repertoire, your well-being muscles are going to be built. So what we want to leave you with for this is sort of like we always talk about, so what's our one big thing? And this is our one big thing, that your well-being matters. This is your life. You deserve a fully engaged life. You deserve a vital life. You deserve to do more than just coping. You deserve to do more than just existing. You deserve to live and be joyful. The good news is there are learnable, teachable well-being tools. And so it is possible, regardless of your external circumstances, to learn how to thrive by creating the internal circumstances that will allow for that. Our biggest takeaway message is that well-being starts with a single, simple question. And that question is to ask yourself, what matters? Do that on a daily basis. Do that on a yearly basis. Do big stop and asks, do little stop and asks. Your well-being will skyrocket if you're able to develop this simple habit that's not so easy given the pull of the world that we live in. We are just so grateful to have been here with you today. And closing thoughts from your end?
No, we call it practices, as we said. It does seem like a simple approach, but the profound effect that it's had on the people that we've worked with. We do this with corporations, we do it with individuals, we do it with couples even, making life transitions. And when you have the conversation, you get it out of your head, you actually look and see what matters, you suddenly realize how much doesn't matter. In jettisoning those negative thoughts, beliefs, and even people from your life, and bringing goodness in is the key to your well-being.
So go out and ask what matters, and we wish you a wonderful, joyful life. Thank you.
Thank you.